Addendum to Humanity's Greatest Flaw, Part 8. Can a healthy relationship be formed between a recovering narcissist and his victim? This is an addendum to Humanity's Greatest Flaw, Part 8, the First Crusade. I mentioned in an earlier video on the Dark Ages that in Rome's arrogance, when barbarians, they called them barbarians, Germanic tribes, came across the border as refugees, Roman leaders could not consider them equals and took advantage of the plight. Eventually, by their lack of humility and empathy, this treatment leads to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. I have yet to get to the point of the so-called Fourth Crusade and the rise of the Latin Kingdom in the East, but I think you can kind of see by what I just said above that it is ironic that it ended up destroying them as well. However, basically leaders focusing only on short-term, lacking wisdom or the inability to see how actions they take today could affect negatively beyond anything they could conceive at the time, ended up leaving their own future children or grandchildren and beyond to suffer far worse. It's how you treat the vulnerable, not your equals, that shows who you are. Well, Pope Urban II may just have been power-mad, thinking only of himself, or he could truly have wanted to unite the West. But by abandoning the scriptures hand-picked by Emperor Constantine at the Council of Nicaea, 325 BCE, he picked a quick fix to a problem without considering the repercussions in the future. What I mean by that is that Jesus talked of love, understanding, and none of that is reflected in anything that the Roman Empire or Pope Urban here showed. For nearly 2 centuries, the West has lorded it over the Middle East and Islam, along with a lot of other places, treated them as inferior, acted as if they were incapable of making decisions. Eventually, the Western leaders realize that the cost is too high, then give freedom to those magnanimously giving freedom. But in our arrogance, we still want to say we carve up the land with false borders, not based on a common identity or culture, but based on making sure the Middle East does not unite and no one country controls too much oil. We just want to pretend we're giving them freedom. We never allow them to grow. Then, when they get fed up at talking, start using violence, we, who ignored them for so long, insist they must first stop fighting, because you can't reward violence. They understand the only reason why the West is even pretending to listen is because of the violence. Because those that have everything sees no need for change until those we used decide they've had enough. At first, the abused will agree, go back thinking and making their point, only to find out those in charge don't want to change. They just want to pretend to empathize, to listen until you calm down, and then they just keep going on as usual, maybe put a band-aid on something and say it's fixed. What I'm describing is a narcissistic personality. Eventually, those ignored realize the narcissist is never going to be part of the solution. However, the narcissist still behaves as if pretend empathy will work like it always did. I see Western Europe and America's leaders today in 2017, most of 2000 to be honest, behave much the same way. They think understanding and empathy will calm things down. Problem is, I don't think the Middle East sees the West as part of the solution anymore. They understand if they talk, the West will keep talking, arrogantly believing that they can get things under control. All they need is to manage the situation. Well, that is fine. However, if they're just talking to buy time and not fix the situation, all you're doing is allowing them to grow stronger and challenge you more. This is a fine line. On one hand, the West must learn to respect and allow the Middle East and other countries to develop naturally. We already did so much bad. Why in the world would they listen to us sanctimoniously preach how much better our society is? They have been manipulated so long, anything we in the West do is going to be seen as further trying to keep them down. It no longer matters if your ideas are best, because their experiences has been the only thing that gets the West to even pretend to address problems is violence. They're playing for time, as I've said before. They will talk, but in order for them to really take the West seriously, it's for us to do more than talk. On the other hand, giving up our own society in the hopes of making them conform is insane. A balance is needed. It won't be easy. I acknowledge the mess of the past. I will manage the mess of the future only as far as it is on our borders. I just think it's time we understand for the Middle East to grow, they have to be allowed to do so. Tyrants being supported or revolutions being supported will never allow the Middle East to grow and heal the wounds that were inflicted on them, and in some cases they self-inflicted. It will be hard, and for a while the West will not like what they see. Remember the Arab Spring? But we arrogantly created this mess, and while we can help them, they will have to decide what help and how much is wanted. Eventually, the anger will settle down. Things will find a level, if we allow it. Those already in the West must be raised up, not shouted down. They have to be absorbed to a certain degree, the great melting pot. But they also must embrace, and this is the most important thing, they must embrace the tolerance that the West usually has, although I haven't seen much of it this last couple of years. They are in the West, and while the West did badly, it does not mean our beliefs in our own land should be forfeit. A balance is needed between allowing countries to grow and evolve without interference. I still remember the Iraq War, 2003. The United States pretended to let the country decide its own institutions, but in the background they put pressure. We wanted to appear to be liberators, yet still have a say on the outcome. We strengthened those that hate us and wouldn't work with us because some in Washington decided we had a right to expect certain things. For example, a quota system, setting aside spots for women to have equality. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for equality, but if we were liberators, not occupiers, they must decide by pretending we put pressure on our allies, who then had to negotiate, forcing them to give more way to those like Sadr than was wise, things that they thought they really needed in order to get what we thought we had a right to ask. They had to compromise things, all so that the United States got what it wanted. You can't treat the Middle East like children anymore. They must discover in their own. It will take a while, but forcing our values on others will only make it longer before they discover themselves what we learned a long time ago. Not because they were slow or inferior, but because we were lucky enough not to have others stifle our growth with their arrogant views of their moral superiority. The West needs more humility, and don't fool yourself, it is not just conservatives I'm talking about. They may interfere overtly, but in the case of Iraq, it was the more empathic left that arrogantly tried to impose their ideal of utopia on others. We in America did not have to live under those laws. How dare we insist we know best, that somehow since we learned this, we can help them avoid the same process and jump ahead. We lacked wisdom on both sides in Iraq, and it was just the latest in a long line of arrogant mistakes that we inflicted on them. We can't fix this. If we are to be a part of the solution, we need to finally show them that we see them as equals. Because someday they will be. Whether we embrace them and help them grow, or they bring us down to in their frustration and destroy the very everything that we have, both the good and the bad, because they're frustrated and they just are tired of asking for you to treat them as equals. This is only based on my personal experience of narcissists and how I've learned to cope dealing with them. I have no formal education, so all of these ideals you will not see in any one place. I just took facts and arranged them differently, adding some that maybe has not been seen before. I think it makes sense, so I share it. Someone else will have to decide if it has a value at all, or if it's all useless and uninformative. I admit my ignorance gladly. Do not treat this as a blueprint to a solution. Use your free will and stop assuming because someone else has a pedigree or a microphone, their opinion matters more than yours. Thank you for listening. Okay, first of all, I want to share these links here to let you know that these are where those other two videos that I was referring to earlier is. Also, I want to point out that I use the word humanity because I would normally use mankind. However, in today's society, it seems using gender is a bit of a problem for some. And if I want to reach the biggest audience, I need to take that into account. If I use the wrong word, people stop listening. And that's not a very smart thing to do. You're defeating your own purpose.